Star Trek First Contact isn't as bad as Star Trek Generations. With that glowing endorsement, onto the plot synopsis. The Borg go back in time to stop humanity's first contact with aliens, and the Enterprise follows to stop them. There's a lot that doesn't work about this movie, but none of it seemed as insurmountable as the nonsense in Generations, even if some of it is pretty bad. If you're not a Trekkie, at the end of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 3, Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the USS Enterprise, is assimilated into the Borg, cyborgs who want to assimilate or destroy every sentient being in the universe. He gets better, and near the end of Season 5, the Enterprise captures a lone Borg drone who is injured, and they debate using him as a weapon to destroy the Borg Collective. But they don't do it, because Hugh, the drone they captured, has traces of humanity in him. Picard shows compassion against the enemies who turned him into an unthinking weapon that killed thousands. That's powerful stuff. Then this movie happens. Picard tells his crew, if any of your friends get captured by the Borg, kill them. You'll be doing them a favor. I can think of at least 2 former Borg who got a second lease on life who might argue with that. He mercilessly kills a man begging for help, mows down another who is already taken by the Borg. Some might call this character assassination, and I can't say I disagree. Even as someone who is only a casual Trekkie, Picard is an inspiration. He uses diplomacy when he could punch and kill, and in doing so, he wins. Picard overcoming his, let's be honest, justified hatred of the Borg when he sees Hugh is more than a mindless killer, it's beautiful. Then this movie takes a gigantic dump all over that. Is it too late for me to say this is worse than Generations? After the episode I, Borg, it's pretty impossible to use the Borg as adversaries for Picard. Yes, a splinter group did show up once more in TNG, the Season 7 episode Descent, but that was more of a Data episode. Picard wasn't ready to ruthlessly murder one of his crew to satisfy his bloodlust. Patrick Stewart acts the heck out of the material he's given, but it regresses his character in the worst way. It would have been great if this movie could have been made before I, Borg. Segue from his hatred here to he's not sacrificing his crew to kill his enemies, but he still sees the Borg as enemies, and then go into I, Borg, where he chooses not to destroy them. But I won't be moving this movie around in time. It still comes out in 1996. You could use a different species that wants to prevent first contact. The Romulans or rogue Klingons see this as the best way to cripple their enemies before they can pose a threat. But I already suggested that in my fixes for the Preboot trilogy. Or keep the Borg. Picard is getting reamed out by this lady, telling him all the casualties they've suffered from the Borg since he refused to wipe them out in I, Borg. A new red shirt on the bridge lost family to the Borg. Now Picard is rethinking his position from I, Borg. He doesn't brutally murder one of his crew, he's just thinking about what he's done. And there's a way you can connect some of these dots, including the introduction of the Borg Queen. A hotly, get it, because she's fine, hotly debated topic among Trekkies. A lot of people don't like the Borg Queen's traits of individualism, when the Borg are supposed to be a hive mind. Their whole thing is getting rid of individualism. Fair point. At the end of I, Borg, Hugh chooses to return to the Borg, and Picard hopes his newfound individualism will spread out to the rest of the collective. Next time we see the Borg, they're considered a rogue faction from the collective, and they're using their own pronouns. Then they've got a queen who is very individual. Picard got his wish. Hugh infected the rest of the collective with individuality, and it messed them all up. Billions of beings with hazy memories. They kind of remember their programming, so attacking non-Borg species is still on the menu. Raw emotions are coming back to them, and they've got weapons the size of a small moon. Picard meant well when he released Hugh back into the collective, but it resulted in many splinter groups of Borg, each with their own ideas of where the collective should go. The Borg Queen has individualism, but she hates it. She wants to restore the collective to how it was, sort of an anti-Data. I don't need Data to be the main character in each movie like he was, but if you're using the Borg and individualism, a very human trait, is a big theme for them, having Data being a big part of this story makes sense. Many have complained about this Admiral telling Picard to stay away from the fight with the Borg. They say because of Picard's past experience with the Borg, he should be the best person to fight them. And the movie shows that to be true, but I'm in agreement with this Admiral. If I call one of my captains, and before I can even open my mouth, he tells me, oh, the Borg attacked a colony. Yeah, how'd you know that? Do you have a telepathic link with the Borg? Might be a good idea to keep you out of the loop, or they might pull an Order of the Phoenix on you and learn our darkest secrets. That seems logical to me, but no, everyone and their cat is complaining about how stupid this is, and the Admiral dies, so Picard doesn't even get a slap on the wrist for disobeying orders, so whatever. Anyway, the Borg Queen wants to cement her own views on what the Borg should be, and wants to integrate with the 21st century Borg to do that. And I'm not the first person to point out how weird it is the Borg go to Earth, have a big battle, and then go back to the past. But if the Borg Borg are still recovering from being hit on the head a few years ago, their lack of tactics makes sense. Maybe the time travel plot was born out of desperation, again, a human characteristic. If the movie can spare a nonsense line about why the Enterprise wasn't affected by the changes to the time stream, it can spare explanation for this. That brings us to the First Contact portion of First Contact. The movie seems divided on if they wanted a dynamic character changed by what happens in the story, or a static character who changes those around them while remaining constant. So they half-butted both options. The movie has just about everyone from the future hero-worshipping Zefram Cochrane, because he boldly went where nobody had gone before. Without him, they wouldn't be trekking. But when they meet him, he's a womanizing drunk who freely admits he doesn't care about space travel and is only doing it for the money. And by the end of the movie, he's shaking hands with Vulcans. All is right with the timeline. Problem is, he doesn't go through any kind of change. He's just the hero history remembers him as by the end of the movie. People tell him some of the remarkable things he says and does in his lifetime, but that doesn't seem to have an effect on him. He's still resisting this future even during the launch. Then at the end, yay, First Contact! It feels like they want the crew to inspire him to be the man history tells them he is, except they forgot to put those scenes in the movie. But they also want to haphazardly do the other option. You've got Picard, who doesn't even meet Cochrane. He learns not to be a murdering psychopath when Mariah Dillard compares him to Captain Ahab. That's literally all it takes. When the entire crew is looking at you like your disappointed dad, and some lady you just met says, Captain Ahab, oh yes, I need to not do that for another 2 years. That's not a character arc. That's, we need the movie to be over so he's all better now. And other than this 5-second inspiration of character growth, this lady doesn't do anything in the movie. She's taken aboard the ship because she's wounded, pulls a gun on Picard, dances with him. Sure, but when I do that, I get put on a list. Then she yells at Picard, and she's out of the movie. For all she does, Beverly could have done that. If you want a character from the past to inspire change in one of our main characters, First Contact is about 10 years after World War III, and Mariah Dillard thinks the Borg and Enterprise crew are part of the Eastern Coalition from this war. What if Cochrane had former members of the Econ as part of his crew? He lost family during the war, but now he's moved past it and is trying to build a better tomorrow. This inspires Picard to put aside his hatred of the Borg. Or go all in on Cochrane not being the noble hero the crew worships, but a scalawag. The movie does that, but it doesn't go as hard as it should. When the crew sees Cochrane's personality doesn't match what history said about him, it should be heartbreaking, considering how big a deal he is to them. But they play it for comedy. LOL, Deanna's drunk. Uh-oh, movie's almost over, Cochrane's a hero now. This option would be better since the TV series already moved Picard past his trauma with the Borg. Picard can feel bad people died because he thinks he made the wrong choice, and that could tie in with Cochrane, but for all intents and purposes, Picard would still be stoic, straight-laced leader we knew him as in TNG, while Cochrane could go through character growth. Our crew comes to the year 2063 to stop the Borg from interrupting First Contact. The Borg attack the launch site before it happens, like in the movie, and like in the movie, Cochrane pretty much gives up. This attack is just the latest in a long series of setbacks to this initiative. Apparently, the novelization says Cochrane was bipolar. I don't profess to be an expert on bipolar disorder, but my very limited understanding leads me to believe this might make sense. Cochrane might get very excited about this idea of an FTL engine, then when something or several somethings goes wrong, he might become very despondent. I wouldn't mind this idea being brought to the forefront, especially if you got rid of some of the misplaced comedic moments, but I wouldn't like the idea of Beverly using 24th century technology to cure Cochrane, as that seems a little disingenuous to people who actually have that disorder. An idea the movie just barely toys with is that Cochrane, essentially the father of the Utopian Federation from Star Trek, built this mission that leads to the founding of the Federation from a weapon made for war. Instead of Cochrane wanting to get rich, a better motivation for this launch would be to unite the planet in the aftermath of the war. It's interesting that their attempt to do that is using weapons from the war. Interesting because Gene Roddenberry, the man most people argue is the father of Star Trek, yes, there were other creative minds who helped build it, but Roddenberry got the ball rolling. Roddenberry, according to the Star Trek TNG Writer's Bible, did not consider Starfleet to be a military organization. But despite Roddenberry's intentions, often Starfleet is shown to have militaristic tendencies. An actual war was going on in this movie against the Borg, and simultaneously in Deep Space Nine against the Dominion. So it's interesting that although this is supposed to be the beginning of an era of peace that will change the universe for the better, that it's built on a foundation of war. While the movie doesn't get into Cochrane's background, and it doesn't look like any of the sources do either, I'd say Cochrane was a former soldier, much like Gene Roddenberry himself. If you have some lines about how these experiences helped Cochrane decide he wanted to make the world a better place so that wars and armies aren't a necessity anymore, that'd be a nice way to help Picard realize, no, even though his decision led to some chaos with the Borg, he made the right choice when he didn't exterminate billions of entities that could be reconverted back to their old selves. Like in the movie, as far as Cochrane and his crew know, the Borg's attack is humans from their time, trying to put a stop to this for political reasons related to World War III. This pretty much destroys Cochrane. Now he's nearly killed by people he's trying to help, maybe former allies to some of the former Econ folks who are helping him build this thing. So he goes into a depressive slump. This defeatist attitude shocks our main characters, probably because his depressive swings were downplayed or weren't recorded at all by history, so the man who is an inspiration just by eating Cheerios is not the man they see here. That kind of slaps them in the face. But they won't roll over and show their time-traveling bellies at the first sign of difficulty. They'll say they're volunteers from a nearby city. They heard about the attack and want to do what they can to help the wounded. Cochrane says, sure, we need medical help, but the launch is off. I would not split our time between a crew on Earth and a crew on the ship fighting the Borg. Spend most of our screen time on Earth. Say once the Borg attacked Cochrane's ship and realized they were followed, they put up some kind of electronic interference to block the Enterprise from sending more people or from communicating with anyone already down. This would make repairing the damage the Borg did a little less easy, and it forces us to pare down our cast so we can focus on a few characters instead of trying to give everyone screen time. If we're keeping my fixes I did with Generations in mind, whoever got more screen time in that one can get less here. Data can be a part of the field team since we want to parallel him with the Borg. And if you're asking why they brought an android who doesn't exactly look like a human, Data spent some time in the 19th century and told everyone he was French, and they pretty much all believed him. Do that again, it would be a fun callback. I won't get too detailed about this, but Cochrane's interactions with the away team will inspire him to get the launch up and running. I don't know if I would need him to find out our characters are from the future, but if he's going to be pretty connected with the plot of the movie, then you would probably want him to find out about the Borg, so yeah, he needs to find out who these guys are, but after he's already made his decision to go through with the launch. Remember the Borg Queen? She doesn't want her humanity. She wants to go back to not feeling, because look at humanity. Look at Zefram Cochrane. He's depressed because we destroyed one tiny missile. I don't want that. Look, these guys just got finished with their third world war. I don't want that. And this is where our Data character stuff comes from. Maybe he starts to second guess himself. Hey, a lot like Picard is doing, about what he's always wanted. I didn't do the emotion chip thing in my fix on Generations. I said that the other movies ignored it. That's not entirely true. This movie does mention it for about 3 seconds total. We're still not going to have him have the chip, but maybe the Borg Queen, she sees Data has really good processing power, she has a damaged escape pod, and limited tools and materials to convert 21st century humans into Borg. So she tries to tempt him to join her, and he's like, oh, if you connected me to your collective, I could feel human emotions you guys are feeling. And she's all, why would you want that? Eventually, Data says, yeah, humans aren't perfect, but when they get it right, they really get it right. Because Cochrane, once he's inspired by the TNG crew, he then inspires his own people. We're gonna fix this thing, and that, in turn, inspires Data to not throw in with the Borg Queen. And that, ladies and germs, is how you have a character be inspired and also be inspirational. I hope I pulled it off, and I'm not too cocky without earning it. That's basically it. The very, very broad strokes of this movie work fine, I think, but it's a lot of the little details that need some work. I know I wasn't very detailed on a lot of what happens once our crew meets Cochrane, but I'm not a big dialogue guy when it comes to these videos, so you can kind of imagine what happens there. Hope you guys like this one, and I'll be back with something else in the future. Until then, have a good one.